America's farthest west highway point. Tonight I'm going to read for us an article by priest Tesarius Barossa entitled Epstein's Island and Westworld, the New Old Ethics of Satanism. Thanks for joining me tonight. If you'd like to support my small farm or my small channel, it's just www.paypal.me/Pike A. And you'll see that I'm in Alaska, and God bless you for your support. A mirror for the new aristocracy. When the world learned about what was happening on Epstein Island, many were shocked by the monstrous reality. Almost simultaneously with these revelations, millions of viewers watched Westworld, a sophisticated fantasy about an amusement park where super-rich clients can satisfy their darkest passions with impunity. These two phenomena, one real and the other artistic, turned out to be mirrors reflecting one and the same spiritual illness. They are not an accidental coincidence, but symptoms of a deep ideological shift that requires not only legal, but also spiritual comprehension. Our ancestors called it demonic delusion. Today it takes the form of a technological dystopia and a glamorous scandal. Epstein's Island and the Westworld series are two faces of the same reality, two symptoms of a single spiritual disease, the name of which is self-deification. They point to a radical ideological split, an abyss in society. Where did the idea come from that for some people, others are just consumables for pleasure? The answer lies not in the field of sociology, but in the spiritual choice between the two projects of humanity, God, manhood, and man worship. From Pythagoras' man measure to Nietzsche's man God. The idea that the elect are above the morality of society is not new. It can be traced back to the ancient sophists who proclaimed that man is the measure of all things. This principle, which severed the connection between truth and objective divine law, contained within itself the seed of future arbitrariness. If the measure of everything is the individual, then the strong and intelligent become the measure of the weak and the stupid. Christianity proposed another opposite anthropology. Every person is the image of God, called to deification, to become a God-man through humility, repentance, and virtuous love in obedience to the Creator and the Provider. This is the path of grace-filled virtuous transfiguration, accessible to everyone through Christ. God became man so that man could become a God by grace, small g. However, the devil's distortion of this idea gave rise to the concept of man-God. When man proclaims himself to be a God, rejecting the very need for salvation, renouncing his cross, his responsibility before the Creator. Philosophically, this was formulated concisely by Friedrich Nietzsche with his dual concept of the death of God and the Superman, living beyond good and evil. What for Nietzsche was the tragic ideal of a lonely mad thinker has become for today's global elites a guide to action, a paradigm in the meaning of their godless existence. The logical chain, man is the measure of all things, man is a god for himself, is not new. In Christian anthropology, man acquires the highest dignity as the image of God, called to love and sacrifice. Whoever says, I love God and hates his brother is a liar, for he who does not love his brother whom he sees, how can he love God whom he does not see? 1 John 4:20. Love for a concrete, visible neighbor is the criterion and path to God. The distortion of this ideal leads to satanic alternative, man worship. This is not a philosophical abstraction, but a life program, which F.M. Dostoevsky brilliantly diagnosed even before Nietzsche and Raskolnikov's theory of those who have the right. His hero asked the faithful question, am I a trembling creature or do I have the right? The answer is the rebellion of Dmitry Karamazov, seduced by the evil one. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. This is the key formula that removes all moral prohibitions. The The Superman who has the right becomes for himself the source of the law, the measure of all things, including the lives of other people, all mankind in the world. Historical roots of the division into superior and inferior. The logic that justifies permissiveness for some at the expense of others is rooted in the most ancient and dangerous principle: divide and rule. This division stems from pride, which gives rise to the idea of a fundamental inequality between the elect, the blessed by blood, faith, reason, or wealth, and the rejected, the damned whose lives and dignity are of little or no value. The origins of this idea in Western civilization understood it as a synthesis of the ancient and Judeo-Christian traditions, are extremely deep and go back to two powerful currents that later merged. The first is antiquity, with its strict opposition of civilization to barbarianism. The Greeks and Romans drew a strict line between themselves, the bearers of the polis, and civilization, Paidi, and barbarians, creatures of a different order, who could be legally enslaved, plundered, and destroyed if necessary. For a Hellenic or Roman citizen, there was one code of honor and law in relation to his equals, but in relation to the barbarian, there were other, much, much more cruel and cynical rules. Here, the model of two morals is already emerging. The second is the Judeo-Christian tradition with its inherent temptation of false chosenness. In both the Jewish and Christian faiths, there's a sacred idea of being chosen by God, not as a privilege, but as a colossal responsibility of service, moral duty, and mission of salvation for all mankind. And in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Genesis 12:3. However, human pride constantly tried to distort the spiritual calling into a worldly privilege, to turn the covenant with God into a reason for exaltation over one's neighbors. The prophets of the Old Testament, Amos, Isaiah, Jonah, and the fathers of the church constantly denounced this false Pharisaic understanding of chosenness, reminding us that God is no respecter of persons, Acts 10:34, and that the true Israelite or Christian is not the one who is circumcised or baptized, but who preserves and embodies his faith and works of love for all. Romans 2:28 through 29, James 2:17. The tragedy of the West and of humanity as a whole, as its Western metastases have spread everywhere, is that the era of the formation of its imperial and colonial identity, a fateful synthesis of these two models of separation, took place. The ancient idea of the superiority of the civilized over the savage was supported and sanctified by a perverted, worldly interpretation of religious chosenness. Thus was born an ideology monstrous in its persuasiveness for contemporaries. Europeans or Christian people are not just more technologically advanced, they are by their very nature, by the virtue of God's providence, bearers of a higher order and law in relation to the rest of humanity. By virtue of being chosen from above, they are destined to rule the world. It was this poisonous fusion that gave rise to the moral justification of Western imperialism and colonialism, with their slave trade and the destruction of entire cultures. It also formed the basis of racial nationalism and Nazism, where the place of the civilized and chosen by faith was taken by Aryans or representatives of the superior race. When I was in Austria, I went to the National Museum, and there used to be several aisles. And if you have ever been there or seen pictures of it, you know how big this place is. But they had aisles of human heads of people that were hunted by the British royal family. That's why it always irks me when I see people bowing their knees or bowing their necks to the British royal family. In 1978, I believe, they were finally ordered to take all the human heads down from the museum, and they're now stored in the back. But if you go into the museum at the head of the aisle where they used to be, you can look at several thick photo books full of the pictures of the human heads that were hunted by the British royal family. In all these cases, the same principle was in effect: everything for one's own and the law for others. And the law was written by one's own. The lower barbarian Goy or Untermensch was taken out of the framework of general human morality, turning it into an object over which the chosen one has almost absolute power. This logic of dividing into superior and inferior slaves became the historical and ideological forerunner of everything that was happening on Epstein Island, and which is artistically explored in the West world, the creation of an enclosed space where the chosen can exercise their will over others with impunity. Whether there are robots or living people, declared subhumans or biorobots. Contemporary context, technology, capital, and escape from death. The uniqueness of our time is in the unprecedented opportunities of fantastically rich and influential people. Global finance, digital technologies, and transnational corporations have created a stratum or caste of people whose power and wealth make them practically immune to earthly law. They live in a legal vacuum created by an army of lawyers, private security services, and political influence. They can actually afford whatever they want without fear of punishment on earth. However, there is still a problem that they cannot solve, which reminds them of their creation, limitation, and vulnerability: death. Death calls into question the godliness of the global elite, and this elite is trying to fight it. Transhumanism, cryonics, genetic engineering, biotechnology, all these are elements of the project to overcome human nature, to get rid of death. It's not just about prolonging life, but about the desire to preserve forever your identity as a Superman with his power, wealth, and excessive pride. Death is the last universal law that reminds these self-proclaimed gods that they are only human. To remove this obstacle also means to finally sever the connection with the common human fate, to stand above it forever, completely asserting one's own right and will. Westworld, simulacrum, and the ethics of those who have the right. The Westworld series is not just entertainment. This is a frank manifesto of the new ethics. It clearly spells out the hierarchy. First are the gods, the clients, everything is allowed to them. Second, the demiurges, creators of the park. They serve the gods, but they themselves try to play creators. Third, the robot hosts are not people, androids, so you can commit any violence against them without remorse. The entire drama of the series is based on the question, what if the dolls gain consciousness, soul, their own self? For the clients of the park, this question does not exist. The reality is absolute arbitrariness, elevated to a philosophical principle. They pay for the experience of absolute impunity. The series legitimizes this model, making it glamorous, technological, and aestheticized. Westworld is an open manifesto of this new old ethic. He promotes it. Viewers want to become clients of the park, superhumans for whom everything is allowed, because their victims are not people, but skillfully made things. This is a safe, simulated sin, which, however, fosters in the viewer the acceptance of logic itself. If your sacrifice is not equal to you, a robot, a thing, a trembling creature, then morality is abolished. The series becomes a simulator for the mind, preparing it for the idea that with enough power and division into castes, everything is allowed in the real world. Epstein Island, ritual and reality. And now let's transfer this model to the real world. Epstein's Island is the very same Westworld, only instead of robot hosts, there are live girls, teenagers, children, infants. Instead of complex artificial intelligence, there are fragile human souls created in the image and likeness of God. This was not just debauchery or crime, it was a ritual. The ritual of initiation into the caste of the chosen, a ritual that binds the elite together with common anti-values, a common complicity in pure evil. The ritual of asserting power through the trampling of the most vulnerable and innocent part of humanity. This is the modern form of vampirism, where the life force on which the superhumans feed is the innocence, the youth, the very humanity of their victims. What is shown in a series as fantasy literally happened on the island, and this is 1,000 times more terrible because it is not the mechanism that suffers, but the personality, because it is not the program that is destroyed, but the soul. The island is a place where the simulacrum has become a nightmarish reality. Here, Raskolnikov's theory was embodied literally. Those who have the right came there to assert their godlikeness through absolute dominion over the trembling creatures, the living defenseless souls, the poor, frightened, kidnapped, abused, tortured children, infants, and babies. It was a ritual that held the caste together by common complicity in trampling on the sanctity of the human person. If in the series violence against the hosts is entertainment, then here is a sacred act of self-deification through corruption and humiliation. This is a practical consequence of the idea that if there is no God, then there is no Supreme Court, then only judgment is our own right to have. Moral permissiveness, the practice of the island. Permissiveness, pride in Satanism, is generated by excessive pride. We are gods, we can do anything, which according to the Holy Fathers is an expression of Satanism. Moral permissiveness, the practice of the island, is generated by excessive pride. We are gods, we can do anything, which according to the Holy Fathers is an expression of Satanism. The devil was the first of the created beings to say, I will ascend into heaven, I will be like the Most High, Isaiah 14:14. He's the first super being who wanted to live according to his own will and not according to the will of the Creator, who wanted to become a God without God, with the same tempting idea. He seduced the first people. It also continues to tempt us, their descendants. The essence of Satanism is in the radical rejection of God as the creator and lawgiver and the assertion of complete independence from him, and the postulation of the absolute self-law autonomy of the I. I am the law to myself and to others, to the inferior. First, this is proclaimed by the evil Lucifer, followed by the people seduced by him. Human godliness is engendered by Satan. Behind them is an inordinate pride, wanting only to command but not to obey. What Nietzsche calls the will to power, the lust for dominion over all the inferior and weak. Epstein's Island is the materialized realm of the satanic idea. This is an anti-monastery. If a monastery is a place for mortifying passions and educating the spirit through obedience and prayer, then Epstein's Island is a place for cultivating the darkest passions and killing the spirit through moral permissiveness. Thus, we see before us the implementation of the satanic project of godliness for the chosen, to become a god through pride, violence, separation of oneself from the plebs, and violation of morality. Its result is eternal spiritual death, the hell of despondency and loneliness. This project is opposed by the Christian ideal of God manhood for all, to unite with God through humility, love, sacrifice, and compassion for one's neighbor. Its result is deification as a complete and perfect blissful union with God. Trans-Godism instead of man-God. Modern theorists of transhumanism talk about the completion of the human project and the transition to a new evolutionary species, so far called transhuman. Human nature itself is declared to be obsolete software, subject to a total upgrade or replacement. According to one of the main ideologists of this direction, Yuval Noah Harari, future creatures created with the help of bioengineering and artificial intelligence will treat people in the same way as people today treat monkeys. The idea of self-deification remains, but it is no longer the deification of man. In order to achieve deification, man as a species must be overcome and abolished. Pride, which gave rise to the slogan, "Everything is allowed," now leads to the dream of creating a new species, for which not only God's commandments, but also the biological and existential limitations of Homo sapiens will not apply. We don't want to remain human anymore, proclaim transhumanists. Thus, the rebellion against God, which began with Satan, after his disobedience to his will, after the denial of his providence and existence, comes to the rejection of the very nature created by him. This is the culmination of the idea of I have the right. If having the right Superman trampled on morality, then his transhumanist error encroaches on the created essence itself. In this light, Epstein's Island and Westworld do not look like endpoints, but only training grounds, laboratories for the cultivation of consciousness, for which the lower, whether human or android, is just raw material. The Christian answer to this is not in a dispute about technology, but in a courageous confession of the enduring value of the human soul, created in the image of God and redeemed by the blood of Christ. The teaching of God manhood asserts that true perfection is not in going beyond the boundaries of humanity, but in filling it with divine grace, to which Adam was called in paradise, and what the new Adam Christ revealed in its fullness. Forewarned is forearmed. Epstein's Island is not an anomaly, but a logical result of the path that civilization has embarked on, placing the human creator at the center of the universe, rejecting objective good and evil, declaring morality a convention. Westworld is its glamorous advertising and ideological justification. Our society is faced with a choice to continue moving in this direction where technology and capital create a new slavery with omnipotent gods and disenfranchised human material, or find the strength to return to the sacred. It is necessary to return to the understanding that man is not God, but the image of God, that his dignity is not in power and permissiveness, but in the ability to love, sacrifice, and compassion. That the ultimate mystery of human life is not how to endlessly prolong it for the elect, but how to fill it with the eternal meaning and grace-filled light available to everyone. Westworld and Epstein Island reveal to us the future that the powerful forces of this world want to realize. However, it depends on the spiritual choice of each of us whether this future will become our personal reality, the reality of our families, our people, our country, our state, or whether we will use it as a terrible and sobering warning. Priest Tasarius Berosonets, March 4th, 2026. This was written tomorrow. Behemoth, Satanism and Liberals by Ilya Postolov. The next reading that I'm going to do for us. I'm sure the vampire skins are burning now. Behemoth, Satanism and Liberals by Ilya Postolov. Here the devil fights with God, and the battlefield is the hearts of people. F.M. Dostoevsky. The struggle between good and evil does not stop for a minute. She happens in each of us. It boils and spills outside, and every day brings us a new challenge. Speech, the infamous group in the temple, was stirred up in public discussion on moral issues, permissible in art and creativity, about the temple space. But time passed, passion subsided, the discussion stopped. Who wanted to get a scandalous fame, he received it. Who wanted to speak out, spoke. History began to be forgotten. However, all remained unconvinced. The band members never repented of anything, even after serving time in prison. To be honest, this whole story is a bold highlighted in font the names of those who are against the church a priori. These are representatives of the so-called human rights community, liberal journalists, office plankton, and some quantity and other Moscow partygoers in general, one continuous creative class. The law then turned out to be on the side of the church, and then the creature holds a grudge. And now in distant Novosibirsk, a new conflict was born between Orthodox Christians and the local creative class. It all started with the fact that Orthodox Gopniks and Rednecks disrupted the concert Satanists from the Behemoth group. Local. The intellectuals did not hesitate to call this fact outrageous violation of freedom of assembly. They say the guys are just disguised, harmless musicians from Poland and not Satanists. Local media supported this position and preferred not to indicate musical preference at all bands, calling them just metalheads. As a result, the public concert gave the following picture. The local Orthodox Gopniks barricaded the entrance to the music club, along the way sweeping away one of the fans of the Polish group Behemoth, the work of which was not their obscurantist taste. They have inflicted an irreparable financial damage to the nightclub. A beaten fan, a city, and a country is in a hole. And at the same time, the entire Orthodox Church, whose interest imagined. To this day, people write angry reviews under this news. Orthodoxy, they say, calls on everyone to love and not to beat. However, maybe it was so, as the media wrote, with that the only difference was that the group was not harmless at all. For a number of reasons. For example, the tour of the group Behemoth was called Russian Satanist. And how do you like such titles of their songs? The Way That Crushes Christ, The Anti-Christian Phenomenon, Christian to the Lions. Before the start of their last song, the lead singer of the group shouts several times into the audience, Christians to the Lions, urging the audience to chant this phrase with him. For this, you can be prosecuted under Article 282. But no, obstruction today is fashionable only for representatives of the church. Having created a negative attitude toward the Orthodox in society, liberal activists are now eager to avenge Satanists. Someone suggested disrupting the procession of the cross on the day of Slavic literature and culture. Someone to hold a rally near the church, turning on the full reel of the band's satanic songs. Behemoth, just think. And these people call Christians obscurantists. It turns out that those who believe in God are obscurantists, gopniks, and cattle, and those who worship Satan, hang cats, and drinking blood in cemeteries. Are they creative people? In my opinion, it's time for the creative class to decide on its genre, hold a kind of confessional coming out. Otherwise, it turns out to be unfair. For the simple reason that they never support, each time choosing the side of some marginalized, either sectarians or Satanists, then punks without shame and conscience. Fresh in the memory of Orthodox Christians are the murders of 3 Optina monks by a Satanist. We know who we are fighting and what force we are opposing. Satanists know to whom worship, and only liberals think that everything is pretend. Of course, they were explained that Satanism is just a philosophy. Take everything from life. Not at all if you call yourself a Guzdim, climb into the back, and at all the Satanism is not harmless. However, it is not enough to scroll through the satanic social media groups and their websites, but better than that, to not to. Degree hatred for Christ and Christians is off the charts. Colleagues of Behemoth, the Norwegian group, Burzum, along with other satanic groups, burned down several churches in native Norway. Also, if you remember, the band Mayhem, or Pay Olin, finally shot himself in the head and committed suicide because he was under the influence of demons. Satanism is exclusively anti-Christian phenomenon. Opposition to Christ and the church is the meaning of their lives. And with all our might, acting within the framework of the law, must protect society, and above all, children from their harmless influence. By Ilya Postlov, May 28, 2014. Just thought this article was a good one to go along with Epstein Island. Because these people from Epstein Island, Clintons, the Obamas, all these liberal comedians that have shows, lots of Hollywood actors. So many of these plastic, smiling, stupid faces are filled with demons. I find it very disturbing that people keep supporting these people and buying their movies, going to see their movies. They keep financing them. And there's so many people still letting their children watch Nickelodeon. The symbol of Nickelodeon is the Epstein Island itself. It's right there. It's undeniable. It's right there. It's their logo. People still let their children watch Disney, who has all kinds of subversive messages saying, gee, damn God, trying to use foreign languages to cover up their satanic ritual that is their cartoons. Even Johnny Depp promoting cannibalism in Willy Wonka. It's so terrible that people keep supporting this. We have to break free from this society. Be dead to the world and be alive to God. You can't be a friend to God and a friend to the world. You can't do both. A house divided cannot stand. You're going to have to make a choice, brothers and sisters. And I pray that all of you choose the right choice. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I love you all. You're all my brothers and sisters, no matter what religion you're from, what you believe. I love you all. And God loves you all so much more than I can ever express. Me, a wretched and unworthy sinner. But God bless every single one of you and protect you from the attacks of the enemy. Open up your heart to God. God bless. I might be on again tonight. We'll see. See if I can get my sinuses open so I can actually talk. I love you all.